Globuspan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that is taken aside, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globuspan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation's building.
She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana, with wonderful people all over this country.
Globuspan believes every Guyanese voice is part of the nation's building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. As the world turns on its axis bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globuspan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
With many flavor, 6 different people blended together. Raise your flag high in unity, we're family with one destiny. Raise your flag high in unity.
Good night, everyone, and welcome to Globuspan Television here in New York. We are broadcasting live. And let me first say that this program is being made available by Mr. Noir Singh and by Mr. Devin Bissoon and Mr. Ryan Gobin, our 2 technical directors. I must say thanks to all our sponsors and a special thanks to our listeners as well. We are broadcasting. You can pick us up on Facebook, YouTube, etc., any social network. And let me first say that we are a fair and balanced network. Tonight I have as our guest, Mr. Elson Lowe, who is the treasurer and for the PNCR and advisor to Mr. Norton. And I have Mr. Sherwin Holder, a PNCR APNU member of parliament. Now, when I say we are fair and balanced, I'm hoping that next week I could have 2 PUP members of parliament or any PUP to come on the program to defend the budget or let's talk about the budget and everything else. So I'm hoping that they will call me. Call me at 518-928-8491. But I'll try to make contacts with some of you as well. So that's for now. Now, tonight our discussion is on coalition politics, cost of living, its impact on the people, the poor, the rich, whatever you can name it. And also, we will be discussing the budget in detail. And who else is better to do that than the economist, Mr. Elson Lowe, and MP, Mr. Sherwin Holder. Gentlemen, good night.
Good night. Good evening, Dr. Lowe. Thanks for, Dr. Rose, rather, thanks for having me. Good night to your viewing and listening audience as well.
You're most welcome. The same people are having trouble hearing me. Devin, why?
We could hear you, Dr. Rose.
Okay. Something came up on my screen, is not moving out. Why?
We're still hearing you, Dr. Rose. You're good on our end.
Okay, good. Now, Mr. Lowe, you've been on this program before, I think twice before.
Sure.
So we know, but we have a little knowledge of your background and everything else. But Mr. Holder, you're not. Can you give us a little knowledge of your background? Tell our listeners who you are and so forth, please.
Sure, no problem. There was a little cut in transmission there, but I get that you would like me to say to your viewers and to yourself a little more about me. My name is Sherwin Holder.
Tell our listeners who you are and so forth, please.
Go ahead. Could I go ahead?
Yes.
Oh, yes. My name is Sherwin Holder. I am a member of parliament. Has been a member of parliament from 2020 to present. I am the Shadow Minister of Natural Resources. I'm also a regional MP for Region Number 2. My background, I grew up in Region 2, was born in Region 2, went to President's College during my secondary school years, and then went on to University of Guyana. I did a degree a bachelor's degree in engineering, mechanical engineering. Graduated from that program with distinction. I would have obtained a master's in energy, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. And I'm also the chairman of the People's National Congress Reform. A little more into my background, the non-political background, that is. I would have worked as an engineer with a foreign company out of St. Vincent that was stationed here in Guyana for many years, since the 90s. I worked with them from 2010 all the way to 2020 before I got into full-time politics. So that is pretty much it. If you want to know something else about me, I will surely be glad to share with you and the audience.
No, that's pretty good. That's very, very good. Tell our listeners, where is Region 2?
Well, Region 2 is known as Essequibo Coast because it is the coastal region within that county. So it's located to the, to the northeast of Guyana, at the top there to the northeast, between Regions 1 and Regions 3. Now it ends at the Pomeroon River, well, just outside the Pomeroon River. It ends there. That's what the end to the north, and to the south, it's well, Supinam, as most persons would know, the port at Supinam. That's the last village in Region 2, on the coastline there. It's a rice farming region. Mostly the economic activity there is rice farming. You do have citrus fruits and vegetables across the region, in pockets, and more in the Pomeroon area, where you have lots of citrus and ground provision. Coconuts is a big thing up there as well, from the Pomeroon.
Okay, great. Now, Mr. Holder, I'll start with you first. Let's first talk about coalition politics. And you can answer this question to Mr. Lowe. By the way, Mr. Lowe is an economist as well. Do any one of you believe or think that the AFC will collate with the PNC or with APNU, given the fact that the AFC have claimed many times that they were treated very, very badly during the Granger administration? Mr. Holder, what do you think?
It's a good question. I'm happy that you gave your perspective on it. But I must first say to you and your audience that we in the PNCR and in the APNU by extension, we believe in coalition politics. We believe that it is good for Guyana. We believe that coalition politics is the future of this country. The thing about coalition is that you get different views coming to the table. You get different persons from different background. So you have a wider coverage of the country, a wider touch on the different ethnic groups and ideas coming out of those groups. And you need that if you are going to manage the resources which will affect the lives of these various cross sections. So that is why I say coalition politics is good. We believe coalition politics is good, and it's for the future of Guyana. As it relates to the AFC, they are a separate entity as we are in the PNC. They obviously have their own internal politics. You will have some that wouldn't want to collate. You will have others that are interested in coalition. But it is our hope that in the end, good sense prevail. And as I said in the beginning, we are much interested in coalition. We are interested in partnering with them. In fact, not only the AFC, but with other partners, other NGOs, other pressure groups. We're interested in this big tent approach. And so I'm hopeful that by March 31st, we can have some kind of agreement. What's in the past is in the past. I wasn't part of it, so I wouldn't pronounce on it, but I can see a good future between the PNCR and AFC and other political parties. If we were to come together, I think we can really gain victory, or we'll increase the probability of becoming victorious at the next elections.
Mr. Lowe, before you jump in on this, Mr. Holder, can I ask you? You
Yes,
are an MP. This means that you had to be an executive member before. And how long have you been a member of the PNCR?
I have been a member of the PNCR for about 8 years now. I became an executive member in 2018, representing region number 2. So I sat on the executive since that time. After that, in 2021, I became the chairman of the PNC. But I did become an MP before that in 2020, a year prior to that.
Okay. Mr. Lowe, can you weigh in on the first question? Coalition politics. Do you think the AFC will collate with the PNCR and APNU?
So I think that they will coalesce with us. I look forward to working along with them. I think they recognize the importance of this moment. I know David, Kathy, Nigel, Ricky, several members well. And I can say that, they're good people. They have the nation's interests at heart. And as a result, we see eye to them in terms of trying to move the country forward. And so we look forward to working with them. Of course, coalitions are not one entity, but multiple entities. So, of course, you're going to have occasional disputes. Sometimes people may not agree with things, but you find ways to navigate that. You find ways to find common ground. As I said, I believe they're good people, so I look forward to finding that common ground with them. And I think that going forward, we can be productive and we can help to really improve Guyanese's life. Many of the policies and the approach, at least the spirit of it, I think they agree with us in spirit, management of the country, being much more responsible in the way we manage the country. I think they agree in spirit with those things. So we absolutely look forward to working with them. Of course, the negotiations, I'm sure, will be complex, but we'll come out on the other side of it stronger for it.
They say that when a party seeks a coalition, it's because that party alone realize they cannot win an election and defeat the government, any government for that matter. Is this the case with the PNCR, Mr. Lowe?
I would say the PNCR has always had the confidence to head into elections on its own if necessary, but we do see value in having our coalition partners with us, even if it is just to increase the overall vote total that you get. Looking at the electoral climate, I would say internationally, we keenly observe that something like 9 out of 10 incumbents have lost, partially due to the cost of living crisis. So we're confident going into this election. But we also, as I said, we're happy to work along with people that we think are genuine, at least in terms of the type of people they are. And so we'll engage with them. Now, if we disagree, if at the end of the day there are policy differences or differences in approach, we'll have to go our separate ways. But for now, we're committed to trying to make things work as best we can.
Mr. Holder, what do you think?
I think we're always confident. We've always been confident as a political entity. We've been around for almost 70 years, and so we understand the political landscape and the political climate. The climate that we're in currently is one in which you have a government that would have committed so many breaches in terms of the trust of the people, in terms of things that they promised, in terms of repeating some of the things that they did in the past that caused their supporters to walk away from them. And so we're seeing that in the current climate, and so it increases our confidence. But as Elson said, we believe in coalition politics. If it's only to increase our numbers, We believe in that. We believe also, as I said earlier, that when you bring these other persons under this tent, you get other ideas. It serves to impact you in a positive way, and so we will always take that route. Once it is available, we will always go that route in terms of entering into coalition with other political parties and organizations.
I want to just alert our listeners here that I'm receiving a lot of messages from you all, but bear in mind I can only ask so many questions that sent to me, so I'll try my very best. Now, Mr. Holder, let me ask you this question as we're in this topic. Before we get to the budget debate, the Speaker of the House banned the word corruption from Parliament. Was it difficult to conduct a debate without using that word, or what substitute you use instead of corruption?
It is difficult when you see corruption every day, and as a lawmaker you go to the House to discuss these issues and you can't say the word corruption. It hampers, your presentation. Affects you. It affects you, and if you try to substitute some other words, you sometimes you still get in the trouble. I use run-ins this time. You will see it in the newspaper. I said, it will affect their run-ins. But you got to use words like that. I think importantly, there should be a review. There should be a review of the words that are prohibited. I think context is everything, because I'm certain that there are laws which deals with corruption. Could you ban me from reading a law or speaking on it? On the purpose of the law is to prevent, ease corruption, prevent corruption. There are laws along that line, and so I believe context needs to be given to each and every word. For me, if you're not casting aspersions on any particular MP, then you should be able to use it, even as a group, even if you're referring to it. I do understand that you are prohibited from using these words because it would entertain the kind of rancor, the kind of, that kind of disorderly thing in Parliament, which you don't want. But again, it is context, and I believe you should be able to speak to the issue of corruption and say the word out loud. But it will be up to us, all the political parties that are in Parliament, and to kind of get together and to decide on that.
If you had to use a quote that's corruption inside, the quote could not have been read. It could have been read, but you had to skip corruption. You
had to skip it, and I found that quite interesting, because you're quoting. Many times you're not casting any aspersion on the other side. You're just simply reading a report, something reported in the IMF or by the World Bank or some reputable organization or something in the local newspapers. Can't I say that the government has been taking some measures to tackle corruption? If I mention that word, that would be a bad thing? No. And so there needs to be context to the word. It's just ridiculous at this stage, to my mind.
Okay, Mr. Lowe, let me ask you this question. It's a bit hypothetical, but sure, you can express your views on it. Should AFC collate with the APNU and its partners? Do you think the government, if they should win the election, or even though in opposition, do you think whoever the leader is, or the presidential candidate for the coalition is, will grant 9 seats to the AFC, as Mr. Granger did?
Well, you just now I thought that you were gonna just ask me whether or not the AFC was gonna collate again. No, listen, we're back in a period where we have to have, I think, robust discussions. Now, there's my personal opinion, and I'm sure the AFC will have its opinion. I've long held the feeling that I don't know that it is a good thing that the AFC pressed for so many seats last time. I think maybe what they should focus on is key issues that they want to reform. And I think that Guyanese, we're looking for kind of a level of credibility from them in terms of pushing reform. And maybe having so many seats might not have been good for the AFC. That has always been my suspicion. I think maybe that's why they were perhaps a little quiet when they were in coalition with us last time. So I would say that they need to have their own introspection. I could be completely wrong in my reading of it, and that I can understand. But I would say it is a good opportunity for them to have some introspection and to kind of figure out how they want to approach things going forward and how they want to relate with us in that respect. So 9 seats, maybe that is where they're going to go again. Maybe that is not actually useful to them. Maybe a fewer seats would be useful to them. Maybe they could focus more on specific issues they want to change. So we'll see whether that introspection is their approach or they have a different approach. But one way or another, we'll try and navigate it as best we can. Because as I said, I do believe that there are areas of common ground between us.
Mr. Lowe, someone sent me a text, but let me say this loud and clear to everyone. I don't know if this is true. I have read the Constitution, I can't recall, but the person is telling me corruption is in the Constitution. I don't know, but I think I'll go back and read it and see if corruption is. You have any idea if corruption is in the Constitution, Mr. Holder?
I'm not certain, but I wouldn't doubt. I wouldn't doubt it's there. As I said, there are certain bills that were passed in Parliament, and I'm certain that at least you would see anti-corruption. You would see that there for certain. So I wouldn't doubt that there, within our Constitution, you would see that word many, many times.
Well, one thing I would add is, the Guyana is a signatory to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. So even if we have to discuss some of our diplomatic responsibilities, and of course there are responsibilities that are tied to that convention, are we just not going to discuss the implications of following through on what we have signed on to? It is very suspicious, I would say, that the government has this focus on this word corruption. It kind of makes you wonder if they're hiding corruption.
Again, let me repeat, I do not know. Someone sent me that information a minute ago, that corruption is in the Constitution. I would have to go back and check on it. I do not know. So don't text me or email me tomorrow and say that I said so. I did not. So let me make that clear to all our listeners here. Now, a tougher question for you guys. Mr. Norton spoke about a consensus candidate. Whatever that means, I still don't know. So if the coalition partners should choose a consensus candidate, and that consensus candidate is Mr. Nigel Hughes from the AFC for the presidency, do you think the PNCR executives will go along with that, given the fact that they're the majority party in the coalition? Mr. Holder?
Well, based on what you said, it suggests that we would be part of that discussion and that decision. So I can't see the coalition selecting somebody and the PNCR is left out in the cold. Obviously, we have a presidential candidate, as do every other or most of the other major partners within the coalition. But look, we will push. I can speak for my party. We will push for our candidate, being the major party, the party that brings, let's say, 90% of the money, the resources required. The base. Political parties have a base. We have a proven base. We've been around for almost 70 years. We have a proven base there of tens and tens of thousands of people. And so in these negotiations, I could only imagine that the question would be, what are you bringing to the table? And this would also involve your question about seats. All these things have to be negotiated. And you could imagine around the table, we will have to discuss what are you bringing, what the other is bringing, and you negotiate accordingly. Sometimes it's not so simple. it doesn't work out, that it's not that straightforward. But I'm just saying these things have to be put on the table, and then we can move from there. For us in the PNC right now, Aubrey Norton has been made our presidential candidate, and it is up to Aubrey and only Aubrey to determine what he will do with it at every stage going forward. The Congress of the PNCR has given him that mandate.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Nlo, you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I would just, of course, restate Sherwin's position that it is ultimately the leader's decision from our perspective. And he has said that if there's going to be any alternative candidates, it will be a candidate that is from the PNCR. I think that he, on a deeper level, believes that we must respect the fact that many people, the vast majority of those who are support the opposition have voted for the PNCR. So the only respectful thing to do, I think, would be to have a candidate from the PNCR. As they say, Vox Populi, Vox Dei, the voice of the people is the voice of God. The next thing I would say is that I always find it odd that while I have the greatest, as I said, respect for Nigel Hughes, there's a lot of talk about his appeal and so on, and I find it odd that people would think that there's no one in the PNC that has any middle class appeal. Anyway, that to me has never made any sense, and so I don't see that as really a possibility. I see it as the leader making his decision and the party trying to approach the coalition, our coalition partners, with a workable solution in terms of how we together go forward.
Have any of the parties, AFC or APNU, did any polling to see if they could win the election? In the case of the AFC, hold the balance of power in the minority government. In the case of the PNC, or win an election outright without the AFC?
Well, Dr. Ross and Sherwin, I don't know if you'd agree with me, but some of what we would do, our sampling, our polling, would have to be confidential, just as I'm sure the PUP has confidential polling. What we would say, though, is that it is, I think, really important to look at what has happened in terms of elections globally. And it has been very difficult for any incumbent to remain in office. I think only Modi and the current Mexican president, their parties have remained in office. Everybody else has lost or had to form coalitions in order to stay in power. So to that end, we think that it will be difficult, similarly, for the PUP to stay in power. They'll likely face very low turnout. Now, whether the AFC is done polling, they would have to answer to that and answer to whether they would make that public. But I would say the broad strokes of it are that we're in a context in which people worldwide are frustrated, and in which people in Guyana in particular, I think, are also frustrated with the cost of living crisis. And so we believe, given that background, that our chances are extremely strong in this election, and that the PUP is going to do what it can over the course of this year, but obviously it might be it is a little bit too late for them to change people's minds as to who they are as a party.
Mr. Holder?
Yeah, I would echo some of what Elson just said. In terms of the poll information, we would want to keep that to ourselves for now. In fact, you got to be very careful with polls. You know, the polls said over and over that Donald Trump wouldn't win the elections, and so it depends on which poll you're paying attention to as well. But as Elson said, you know, the ground is ripe for us. We believe in the PNCR and in the APNU by extension that we can win these elections. You know, things are favorable. We believe that it's only the oil money and those little goodies that the reigning party can dole out in these times. We think that is what is actually keeping their head or their nose rather above the water, sometimes going down and sometimes getting above. So it's good. We think that it's good for us. I'll tell you this. One set of information had suggested, and this is, you know, the public will agree with this. Elections have been close, very close in this country for the last few elections. There is information which suggests some bit of closeness, but I could tell you that is not good when you're in government, because if you're neck and neck at this stage of the game, and it is your track record that will be up for scrutiny, your 5 years, then you will be in trouble. And I think you can juxtapose that with what would have occurred in the U.S. When you see the reigning administration is neck and neck with the opposition. It is quite easy for the opposition to get past you in the months leading up to the election. So that much I will say. I think we're in a good position at this stage. We're comfortable at this stage. We just have to get the work done.
Let me just clarify something in what you just said. In 2011, there was a one-seat majority by the AFC APNU coalition. In 2015, there was a one-seat majority by APNU and plus AFC. And in 2020, there was a one-seat majority by the PPP. So in the last 3 elections, they've been extremely close indeed, one-seat majority. And hopefully the PPP is doing everything now to turn that around to win at least 2 or 3 seats majority, but it's left to be seen. But Mr. Ole said something that it is your belief that you all could win the election. What make you have such beliefs? What give you the confidence to have such beliefs?
Well, I've been on the ground a lot in my region and in many other regions, and I think the cost of living specifically is affecting people, affecting the ordinary people. There's lots of complaints there. There are some other issues in terms of the PPP's mismanagement of various sectors. For example, the power sector, where you have the bulk of the population is most affected. So I think that will certainly have an impact. And then there is this issue of corruption. You know, in 2015, I think the issue of corruption played a major role to unseat the PPP. And they would have made some promises during their time in opposition to correct themselves. They made promises too, I should include this, to reopen the sugar estate also played an important role in terms of getting their numbers back up to some level that they could have been competitive with the coalition. But they failed in those 2 areas. Largely they failed. They failed in terms of delivering reliable electricity to the bulk of the population. They failed in that promise with Gaisuku, and you can't disregard it, because Gaisuku touches there is that sugar belt there from Region 3 all the way to the quarantine in Region 6, and so that's about in Region 3 you got about 40,000 voters normally. Region 6 another 30,000, some on the East Coast area. So you're talking about affecting people, and I'm talking about people in their base, affecting probably about 100,000 persons or close to 100,000 persons in their own base. And I think those 3 issues are critical and will have an impact on the PPP, a negative impact, that is. There are some positives too coming out from our side. We have economists like Elson Lowe and many others who are working hard to put forward our programs. And we believe that we have superior programs, social programs, that is, to the People's Progressive Party. And it has been gaining momentum, gaining attention in the public, to the extent that the PPP is going all out. It's like an all-out war right now. They're using every media house at their disposal to discredit our programs. But I believe that the common man can relate to what we are saying. And here is what, if I can expand on it, Dr. Rose. For example, we would like to give a 35% increase. We intend to, not like to, we intend to give a 35% increase in our first budget to all public servants. We think that will go a long way in terms of giving those public servants a livable wage or something they can work with closer, carrying them closer to a livable wage. We have programs. Of course, we will give cash grants. We'll have cash grants, direct cash transfer. We are looking at a good governance cash transfer as well, where we tie up a lot of the corruption. We cut out rather a lot of the corruption. We have a unit probably looking at these areas where you have a lot of wastage and corruption, and we cut it out, and so we can offer more again to the people, a good governance, cash transfer. We have programs, the basic utility programs covering the basic utilities like electricity and water up to $10,000. The government picks up the bill for water up to $5,000. So you see, we're targeting the poorer class, the people. We have a $10,000 cash grant for every child up to age 16. And if you're a child 5 years and below, we give you a 2005 nutritional voucher. So that will carry it up to $12,500. We intend for the older folks, for the people in pension, we will at least double that pension. We're working on actually giving $100,000 to pensioners so that they can survive. These are people that are struggling. I know lots and lots of pensioners out there. They have no one to depend on, or sometimes they're depending on some child that is overseas that would send a little money from time to time. These are struggling people. These are poor class of people. And I believe that these measures are resonating with those people on the ground, regardless of what the PP is saying. We all together, in a nutshell, and I can go on and list a lot of other measures that we have. I'm sure Elson will have some too to discuss. But in a nutshell, what we want to provide to every household in Guyana is around $1 million in cash and other benefits combined. At least $1 million to every household annually, and we believe that it is workable based on what we've seen, based on all the wastages and so that we've seen, and we've looked at the economy. I know Elsa would want to expand more into it, but in a nutshell, that is what we're offering at this stage.
Okay, Mr. Lowe, before you jump in here, I want to just say this. And it's happening to a lot of countries. Across the board increase. That's something of yesterday's economic planning and so forth. Because if you're going to give 35%, Mr. Holder, with all respect to you, across the board, a person making $1 million a month, he or she will get $350,000. Am I right?
All right.
But a person making $100,000 a month will get only $35,000.
Correct.
So that disparity doesn't work. I hope governments, not only in Guyana, but all around the world can say, look, we have to segment this type of increases. We give the upper echelon, let's say a guy making $1 million, we give him a 10% increase. And a person making $100,000, we give him 35% increase. And that will more seem to be like a balance.
I agree with you. I think the word all public servants was not the correct word to say. But we're giving public servants. You would recall that in our last government, that was exactly the approach that we took. We give more, for example, in 2016, we gave 10%. It's surprising that these guys can give only 10% at this stage. In 2016, if you go back, you will see that we gave 10%. But what we did, the persons at the bottom got that 10%, so they got more. The people with $1 million, I believe they got 1%. So when you had this retro, I believe all parties were carrying home about the same sum. There was this kind of equity in the way we implemented the measure, and so that is exactly what we will do. Just for clarity's sake, that is exactly what we will do. In fact, I should say this, that our approach to governance will be one of focusing more on the people that need more. If, for example, if you go to a community that has bad roads, so many things are wrong, and you have to do more roads. Let's just look at infrastructure. That community will get more through our budget, more focus in terms of doing more roads, as against another community which may have only one or two roads. We'll still have to do a road, but the investment wise, we'll give more. In terms of cash grants and our programs, we will focus more on those persons that are at the bottom, because they're the ones who need it the most, not the person that is a millionaire or a multimillionaire, and we come and we want to give you money just like that. So that is the approach that we will take. A general approach towards governance will be one to focus on the people at the bottom, the lower level and the working class.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Lowe, before you weigh in, let me say this for the records here, Mr. Holder, and it's the first on Globespan Television. You're telling our listeners and telling the world that pensioners will receive $100,000 a month, one. And two, APNU, AFC government will give $1 million annually to every household in Guyana. I think there are about 315,000 households in Guyana. Now, Mr. Lowe, have you worked out the cost of this? Given the fact that oil prices do fluctuate, is this sustainable?
Thanks very much for your question there, Dr. Rose. The first thing I would say is, yes, we've worked out the costs clearly. The next thing I would say is that we want to really help Guyanese understand that it is not a lump sum $1 million transfer to households, as Dr. Clive Thomas had advocated, but rather we have a wide variety of policies that will benefit households, benefit individuals, that will work out to roughly $1 million or more per household. So as an example, Sherwin has talked about some cash grants, but separate from that, we've also said that we're going to lift the tax-free threshold all the way up to $400,000 a month, which will benefit many people significantly, low-income people, yes, but also those that in the middle class Guyanese will significantly benefit from that. We've also got policies like a job seekers benefit. So those who are looking for work, we're going to give them $40,000 a month to bring them above the poverty line there, but also to incentivize people to look for work. And on the other hand, you've got benefits like the 50 for 50 stipend, where we'll give $50,000 a month to 50,000 people who are seeking higher education or going to do their maths and English. You know, many Guyanese don't have maths and English passes at CSEC. So the idea is to help us to build up human capital. So really what I would say is it's a basket of programs. In terms of the affordability of it, I want to make a couple of key points. The first is it has kind of gotten away from us in this country because it's been normalized. But from 2020 to now, the national budget has increased 4 times over. And the budgets of 2023, 2024, and 2025 constitute 15 years worth of pre-oil budgets. These budgets are massive budgets. And so what we are saying is, we first of all need to take a look at our overall spending, identify areas of waste and corruption, which IMF figures have put at nearly $300 billion, and eliminate that or reduce that. That will free up a lot of fiscal space. We also believe that consumption will lead to a lot of VAT being generated. So that will also add to our tax base. And then even when we look at this, when you look at the top line number for the various policies and so on, you still will have the majority of the budget available for infrastructure, health, and education, and those other investments. What has happened is the budget has grown so much that there's so much fiscal space. You can do all these policies, plus do infrastructure, plus run the country, the way that it has been run under us in the past. So there's a lot of space for that. The other thing I would say is, in terms of, I know many people are concerned about the question of oil price volatility. We have been speaking at length about it. We've spoken at length about the PAP's willingness to drain the Natural Resources Fund, changing the act so that they could withdraw nearly 100% of the monies that are in the fund, which we absolutely do not agree with. We believe that the monies there should be conserved and that we should focus on spending more efficiently. And so between the increase in VAT and the cutting out the corruption that we've seen, most of our additional spending will be completely covered even without additional oil revenues. What we intend to do is to have a robust sovereign wealth fund, to activate the investment committee of that sovereign wealth fund, to receive dividends from that sovereign wealth fund, which will be very substantial dividends as the sovereign wealth fund grows, and to use that to help us to balance this budget going forward. So we kind of, I think Ines have kind of lost track of the fact that this is not the $300 billion budgets of years gone by. This budget is an entire $1 trillion bigger than the $300 billion budget we used to talk about. And so the other thing is to ask yourself, maybe this is why they don't want to use corruption in the parliament. Man, where's the $1 trillion going? Because it feels like this is a government, this is a pre-oil style government. It doesn't really feel that different. Where is $1 trillion going? We are concerned about that. And we will put in place, based on recommendations from the IMF, based on recommendations from international business organizations, we will put in place the governance structure to be able to manage this much money effectively.
Yeah, if you allow me, Dr. Rose, just to say something.
Okay, go ahead.
Easily we can see in the next 5 years, or before that, our oil production will rise. With the 1 or 2 PSOs, 2 new PSOs at least coming on stream, FPSOs coming on stream, we can see the production going to $1 million barrels per day easily. So you'll have some compensation there. As what will happen, or what should happen as well, is as the investment in FPSOs slow, our share will go up. We're now getting 12.5%. And so based on our discussions with Exxon, you wouldn't see that that amount of FPSOs coming in now as they start to cover the entire Stabroek Block where there are discoveries. And so discoveries will slow, and therefore that capital cost will be reduced. They should be they should complete paying for some of these projects, especially when you up the production there. So what you will see in a couple of years' time is our share going up closer to 50%. Maybe in another 2 years, 3 years' time, you will see us getting to maybe 35%. It means therefore that more revenue will come in. By no means I'm saying to you that we're just focusing on oil, because we spoke at length, the lead and others, on various programs about improving in agriculture, making gains in terms of manufacturing, something that we don't believe that this government has focused on in the last 5 years. So you will have all of that going on the other side, even as oil revenues increase. Last point I want to make is that Irfaan Ali, no less than the president himself, on January, and you can Google it, your audience can Google it. In January of 2023, he said, when asked the question about direct cash transfers, he said it's not feasible. It's not feasible. The opposition doesn't know what they're talking about. From then, right to 2024, Jack Dio and Irfaan Ali said that the APNU wants to eat out the money and all sorts of ridiculous things they said. Yeah. And this is on record. They're on record. You can Google it to check it. Up to October of 2024, they were against direct cash transfers. October, a few months ago. Then suddenly in January, as we spoke about periodic, we wouldn't have this one-off. We'll have periodic, and you will know when it is due, so that you can make plans, in terms of your bank, whatever you have to do. They came out and said, you know what? They're going to do cash transfer, and it wouldn't be one-off. It will be periodic. This exact position of the opposition, the same position they would have taken. And so you can't believe them, everything that they say when they go out and try to give this impression. The opposition doesn't know what they're talking. We've studied these programs, and so we're confident that we will be able to do it. I'll give you this last point. In the budget estimates, in the interrogation of the estimates, we found just in 2 programs in health, billions of dollars in wastage in drugs and overpayments about $9 billion. When we talk about putting $20 billion towards the cost of living measure, then you can have it here. If you cut this kind of loss, you can have it. If you go to the $214 million, and I did speak about it in my budget presentation, that 214 million US, half of that belongs to us. If you recover that, it's $20 billion you would have recovered again to put which you can put in the hands of the poorer class people. So there are various ways of garnering the cash. We know how to get it done, and we will get it done once we're in office.
So I want pensioners to hear me tonight, workers to hear me tonight, and household people. $1 million APNU, if we should win the election, will give $1 million to every household in Guyana. As I said, there were 315,000 households. Plus, pensioners. Right now, I think you're making $41,000 a month. That will jump to $100,000. And the threshold, I think it's what, about $100,000 now?
$150,000 now. It's going to be at $400,000 on
that will be $400,000. You're hearing it for the first time here tonight. This is the PNC landmark decision-making process in place. So,
well, Dr. Rose, with the greatest respect to your show, and we're very happy to be here, but it's not the first time we've said this. We've been saying it for a little while.
On this show.
In fact, we issued a lot of these statements prior to the budget, and a lot of the policy positions and so on we've been saying for some time. But what is happening is that people are sitting up and paying attention, perhaps because this election year. And of course, you saw the finance minister try to say, oh, it's 800 billion it will cost, and try to scare people. But we have dispelled that, and we've helped Guyanese to understand, A, that this is very much affordable, and B, what the specific policies will be. One of the things, though, I want to leave with you that really concerned me from the finance minister's remarks, moving that tax-free threshold from $130,000 to $400,000, which would benefit the vast majority of Guyana's workers. That only costs 2.5% of the national budget. 2.5%. And I want those watching who do desperately be looking for some relief from the heavy taxation that we have in Guyana to ask themselves this: if in this context, where it only costs 2.5% for you of the national budget, for you to get a major tax break, the PPP still will not give you a tax break, will they ever give you a tax break? There isn't even a need to tax people at that level, but they still insist, even though you won't even notice it, so to speak. Now that I think is something that a lot of people were disturbed by. The fact that he came out and was proud to say that they're not in support of moving the tax-free threshold to $400,000 per month. That was concerning. So we'll see how middle-class voters, persuadable voters react to that. But I would say that that just shows the level of stinginess. You have a budget of nearly 1.4 trillion, and you can't give people 2.5% in tax cuts. That's strange.
The question I will ask both of you: what are APNU AFC proposals for the private sector? As you know, Mr. Law is an economist. Tons of books have been written that the private sector is the engine of growth in any country.
Sure.
So what incentives would you give to the private sector?
Well, there's a couple of key areas that we want to zone in on. I'll start with the financing side of things. Number one, we've spoken about a development bank that is focusing on productivity, adopting new technologies, because we've seen the IDB put out studies on more than one occasion that has indicated Guyana has one of the lowest rates of technological adoption. And looking at Robert Solow's Nobel Prize winning work on the role of technology in economic growth, we recognize the need to finance that and need to help businesses to expand. So for medium to large scale businesses, we've said this budget, there needs to be $50 billion put aside for a development bank that's going to allow businesses to scale. On the smaller level, on a micro level, we've talked about giving the Small Business Bureau an additional $3 billion so that businesses, those that are supplying goods on the market, typical businesses, are able to expand to meet the needs of a growing economy and to be able to benefit from low interest loans. That's on one half of the equation. On the other half of the equation, We believe that you're going to see a lot of profit in the private sector as we increase wages and salaries and provide these kinds of transfers, because Guyanese will, of course, consume. And so while on the one hand, we're increasing your capacity to expand by giving you access to finance, there will also be demand for the goods and services that our private sector will produce. So we anticipate a sharp growth in Guyana's private sector as a consequence of that. We also have said that in targeted areas, we're willing to waive taxes such as agro-processing, because we know that those are areas where we have competitive advantages, and certain forms of manufacturing will evaluate and remove taxes on those areas. That aside, some of the other programs that we think are really vital, we're going to focus on developing a fertilizer plant from the natural gas that we have. And we're going to focus on providing free or low-cost fertilizer from that plant to help our agriculture sector to expand sharply. Now, that, of course, means that the business sector will be able to benefit from those initiatives. But also, we anticipate that the cost of living will fall because you'll have more supply of goods and services on the market, especially agricultural goods. And you'll have kind of a better management of access to finance. You'll have more access. One of the things that we want to point out has been really concerning the past couple of years is that there has not been adequate provision of foreign currency, access to foreign currency for businesses. There has been a 3-year shortage. Even the GCCI and the Private Sector Commission have complained about a shortage of foreign currency. We will ensure that there's access to foreign currency. We'll look at how we can navigate that with the Natural Resources Fund. We'll look at the deficit in foreign currency. And the result of that is that businesses will be able to bring in the goods they need to meet demands of the market. That, of course, means more profit for the businesses, but it also means that we can bring down prices. A consequence of having a shortage in foreign exchange is that people have to go to the black market, or people have to go to people who are selling, providing foreign exchange at a higher rate. And that can be, a 10% difference, a 5% difference, which you then have to pass on to your consumers. So that shortage has actually exacerbated the cost of living crisis. And it's not us saying that it's a shortage. Every now and then you hear the Private Sector Commission, the GCCI, business people complaining about it. If you yourself go and try to send money, they tell you, we don't know when we'll have foreign currency, you have to wait. It's been terrible, and it's been terrible for a long time. That will stop on us. And so the private sector will have access to what it needs to provide what Guyanese desire.
We got a budget to cover, we got cost to cover, but someone said, this is for you, Mr. Holder. Someone said the Guyana population is just about 790,000 people. And Guyana, instead of having 26 ministers like what the Granger administration had there, and I think people got 18 or 19 or 20 ministers, Guyana needs only 11 ministers. The person is saying 1 minister for each region, and that's 10 ministers, and the 11th minister be the roving minister. Now, for Region 2, you'll have 1 minister there, and that minister will be responsible for education, healthcare, infrastructure, everything you think of, for that region only. So you'll have 10 regions, 10 ministers, and they will have meetings to coordinate nationally. That's what would be the work of the roving minister, the president, and the prime minister. So 10 ministers, 1 for each region. This is a new concept. And the 11th minister is a roving minister, will coordinate policies among and between the regions. What do you think of that, Mr. Holder?
Look, everybody is entitled to their own idea, but there's obviously problems that could be generated from that kind of system. I haven't heard everything in the proposal in terms of how the voting, for example, will happen and how you'll arrive at these 10 ministers. But what I say, look, the focus shouldn't be on how many ministers or how many ministry. It is the effectiveness of those ministers and ministries, because you could reduce the number of ministers by 10, and if you check what you will save and put that against our budget, for example, it's nothing. It's like it makes me remember when I was an engineer at a company and somebody had suggested, I think it's the CEO said, Holder, these lights always on and we should get them off. But when I did an audit and I checked, it's so insignificant. It doesn't change the health of the company. And so I put it into that context. In terms of the minister, it's not about the number of ministers, it's the effectiveness of the ministry and the delivery of service, goods and services, the resources to the people. So I wouldn't go with an approach like that. In fact, you can have different ministries. You can have a combination. While you can have a combination, as we did in terms of communities, we had, for example, a Ministry of Communities, which we thought if you put what is it, housing, you had housing under it, you had some other ministries there. There were a few ministries there though. We thought that you have to build communities, and so if you have all these couple you put together under one minister, one senior minister, and so they could collaborate, effectively collaborate and get the job done in a more efficient way. You can have that, but at the same time, you can have some other ministries, new ministries. People are of the view, or they think that these ministries that exist, these are cast in stone. We can have new ministries. We can have other ministries that could look at certain things specifically and be very efficient in terms of doling out goods and services to the people, providing services to the people. So I wouldn't take such an approach. But we would revisit it, look at it, and come up with the best solution when we get government.
And this question is to both of you. APNU was there for 5 years, and during the 5 years, I think they gave out less than 8,000 house lots to people. The PP government is there for 4 years. This is the 5th year, and they've already shared 50,000 house lots. Was APNU sleeping at the wheel?
I think one of the key things to note is that there's been a lot of complaint that the PP is giving out house lots where there's not been the infrastructure that's been built out. That, I think, has been very concerning for a lot of people. So there's a question as to what exactly those numbers are. Of course, we could have done more for housing, but what we believe is where we want to focus, or one of the things we want to put a lot of focus on, apart from house lots, is that, not a lot of Guyanese, or a lot of Guyanese, because they've been constrained in terms of the increases in their income, have not been able to build on their house lots. So we believe that a rent zone program where we will go and build your house and you pay rent until the rent goes towards the ownership of the house. We believe a program like that will help Guyanese to get past the financing constraints. Not to cast a negative light on those companies that provide credit, but when it comes to things like washing machine and sofas and so on, you'd be surprised how many Guyanese owe money on things, haven't been able to pay, and as a result have a bad credit rating. You would be surprised at how many people have borrowed money from these types of companies and as a result have a bad credit rating.
No, but the question is, why APNU could not have given out more house lots though? And that's a valid question. You can say that the PP did it, but they gave out over 50, I checked it myself, over 50,000 house lots in 4 years. The people need house lots, even though the area is not developed. When it's developed, the people will have at least a year or 2 years to start building, or else it can be taken away from them, from my understanding. So why was APNU so reluctant to give out house lots? That's my question.
What the points we're trying to get at is this. If an area does not have the infrastructure for the house lot, anyone can just tell you, here's your house lot, look this paper. You need to have some place that you can actually build on. Otherwise, that and nothing, as my father said, that and nothing is the same thing. I mean,
but APNU should have given out the house lots and build on it too. And
well, my point is infrastructure is needed. You need to have the proper roads, electricity, water, and so on for people to actually.
So why APNU didn't do that? That's my question.
Well, why we didn't give out paper house lots as opposed to real house lots?
No, it was a paper house lot, but you can categorize it anyway. But what I'm saying, and I'm serious about this.
Yeah.
This is something I don't understand myself. The people need land. Someone wrote a letter to the paper the last time. How come the government could have land and she can have land? Why do I have to buy a piece of land and live in this country? The government gets it free. Why I can't get it free? So that was a valid point that woman made at the time when I read that letter in the papers. but the government has the monopoly on land and so forth. Anyway, Mr. What have you to say?
Dr. Rose, if I can comment on this house lot,
Yes.
I would be the first to accept that we could have done more. I believe more could have been done. I don't know of all the troubles, of course,
Right.
within that sector. One of the things I heard during that time was some difficulty in terms of acquiring some of these lands from Gaisuku. I don't know the inside stories on it, but I know there were difficulties because if you check, a lot of these lands are Gaisuku lands. I know there was some difficulty. Don't ask me why. I wasn't a minister. I can't give that to you. But look, I agree that every Guyanese should be able to own their own home at a very early stage, and that is why we carry down the age to 18, because we believe that even at that age, you should be entitled to own your own, have your own lot, and then be very, very progressive. But on the issue of them giving 50,000 house lot, one, they have more resources to go.
True.
They have more that they can develop. They can clear the lands, because look, you can't just allocate lands just like that. But I will question that number. I will question that number, and here's why I will tell you. Here's what I will tell you. I would call it promissory notes. I would call it promissory notes, because everywhere I go, I live in region 2. They would have claimed that they gave out 1,000 something in charity, another 1,000 something on the naming. When you go to those schemes, there's nobody living there. There's absolutely nobody living there. After 5 years, that is, nobody's living there. You got a note, but you don't know where the lot is. You can't progress. So it's almost like if you didn't get it. Almost like if you didn't get it. In charity, there is still swamp. Now you're hearing that the land is pagas, and they've tried to develop it and it's not happening. Maybe their approach to engineering, etc., needs to change. But that also is not happening. And that seems to be the case for a lot of people. While the leader of the opposition was presenting, a young teacher messaged me. I can't remember her name. The note is in my phone here. She's somewhere she was just given a promissory note for Region 3. And I read the letter, she sent it to me, and it said that she had to pay upfront $550,000. So she said, listen, I'm a teacher, a young teacher. With my salary, I can't afford this. Is there anywhere that you can direct me to that can help me in terms of a soft loan? I said, well, if you're a part of the credit union, then you might be able. She said, no, she's not a part of the credit union. I said, maybe you can check the IPED bank, but then I recognize IPED gives these agri kind of loans. I don't believe they give those kind of loans for that. So I'm still trying to, I'm now going to approach the minister or the CEO for housing to talk to them to see if she can pay. I said to her, can you afford 250, scrape up 250? She said, yes, she believes she can do that. And if she gets some more time, she can pay it. This is the struggle for most people with that promissory note. And that is why when we make reference to our rent to own, they have a good laugh and they try to tell people that, oh, the PNC or APNU wants people to rent. That is not the case. This is only part of the housing program. For those persons who would pay a rent, might be in a renting house now, they will see it fit to utilize that rent instead. Move into their own home, utilize that rent, and you're actually owning it. You're in there, you're utilizing everything, and you get that time to pay. It's a marvelous project that can help tens of thousands of Guyanese.
Great. Now, let me go to a commercial break quickly here, and then we'll be back. Listeners, don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. All from onesupplier.com. That number is 1, not letters. Where you can purchase all your West Indian food and groceries, including roti, fish, curries, meat, you name it. You can get everything from all from one supplier, and it's delivered directly to your home across the country. That's the United States. You can use your EBT cards, your credit cards, your debit cards, whatever it is. Just call 718-551-3292. All from one supplier. They will provide you with all your needs, every West Indian. And TravelSpan has been in business for over 30 years. This is the 31st year in business. And they have an all-inclusive vacation package for you. They have upcoming tours going to Dubai, going to India, going to South Africa, going to Norway. TravelSpan will provide all your traveling needs. It has offices in New York, Rosalton, that's in Guyana, Val Park, and Chaguanas in Trinidad and Tobago. You can call 718-845-0437. TravelSpan for all your vacation needs. Now, gentlemen, back to you. Cost of living. Mr. Lowe, you are an economist, and you are an advisor to Mr. Norton, the leader of the PNCR. As you know, cost of living affects the poor more, but it also affects the middle class. It affects merchants, it affects the rich. When I say merchants, if things are too expensive, the poor and the middle class can't afford to buy it. So the merchants are saddled with those items sitting on in their stores. The rich don't make as much money because people are not spending their money. So cost of living affects everybody across the board, but I will admit it affects the poor even more. What would be your advice to the minister, to Mr. Norton, in order to reduce the high cost of living and provide some incentives to the people to help them get along?
Well, thanks a lot for your question. Well, what we would advise and what we have advised the government, we've put out several proposals. From the time that the cost of living crisis began, we put out these proposals and we've continued to add to them. But one of the things we've indicated is that what we need to do in Guyana is to target some of the areas where we're seeing a lot of inflation and where we've seen the cost of living increase. And that, of course, has been concentrated, unfortunately, in food prices and transportation prices. So what we've indicated is that, number one, we want to see farmers be given grants so that they can purchase equipment, so that they can operate at a lower cost of production. That's, of course, farming equipment. Additionally, we've also said that we want to see vouchers provided to canter operators and bus operators so that they can purchase fuel at a cheaper price, so that they can produce their transportation costs will be lower. That is pretty critical because what we've observed is that a considerable share, and there's a lot of studies that talk about this, a considerable share of the increase in the cost of living has been due to the higher oil price. We also point out that Guyana has earned much more money as a result of the higher oil price, and the $60 billion that the government has paid out in the course of this cash grant, this one-off cash grant that they're talking about, that they provided or they're providing. That $60 billion came from the $60 billion that the country unexpectedly earned due to the war in Ukraine, which produced very high oil prices. And so we've been pressuring them since that money became available to use that money to fight the cost of living crisis. We also believe that, as we've said, we should increase the disposable income by increasing the tax-free threshold to 400,000 and also providing public servants with a salary increase. By managing our foreign exchange well, by ensuring that farmers have what they need to expand production, by lowering the cost of transportation for food and other critical goods, you will have an economy which is able to keep prices low. What we've not seen is any of those types of initiatives. And so the cost of living crisis has continued. And I think at this point, it's safe to say the government has failed to contain the cost of living, or at least I would say that that's the opinion that many Guyanese seem to be sharing. Those are some of our measures, but we've spoken at length about even more. But the point is that there's capacity to do something because the higher oil price has given the country higher revenues. It's about the willingness to do something. And so we've been saying this for years on end. We've been talking about these types of measures. And, obviously Guyana's had a high cost of living since 2021, 2022.
Okay. Mr. Holder, the government gave out cash grants to the people, $100,000, or is giving in the process of giving it out to everybody. But last year they gave out to parents, I think it was $45,000 for kids' uniform and kids' school equipment and so forth and so forth. But I have relatives, and a uniform, a shirt and a skirt for a female, a young girl, that would normally cost X amount of dollars. Since the stores or the government give out this money, the price doubled. The cash grants, the government give out money, the price have been increased drastically in the stores. Do you think there should be some form of price control?
We've been having that debate for some time. I must say we don't necessarily agree with price control. Price control has its own problems that come with it. It was tried in the past, and we understand lots of trouble can come from that. But there are initiatives that could be introduced. You would recall, Dr. Rose, you had places like Guyana stores offering things at a cheaper cost, where the poorer class, the people could have gone and pick up quality stuff. The what you call this, Guyana Marketing Corporation also did a similar thing. So you can take that route. Although the government's arm is pretty long, and there are other measures that you can take. You can also look. They need to be talking with these suppliers of goods and services as well, because that is something that has been occurring in Guyana all the time. As soon as you hear a little increase in salaries, everything jump up, and it defeats the whole purpose of giving an increase. We expect to boost businesses, provide tax breaks to them, and that kind of thing. Maybe we might look at the corporate tax. We would have lowered it. When we were in government the last time. I think we brought it down to 45%. It is something that the private sector don't acknowledge. It's something very good. We know that they had loved it, but they don't, for whatever reason, they don't acknowledge it. Maybe we'll have to look at that. But if we give you something, then you will also have to do something for us, because we can't entertain greed at that level. You making more and more money and the ordinary at the expense of the ordinary man. So we'll have to implement some balanced policies to ensure that the poor and working class can survive. Elston is absolutely correct. Food inflation is the big man in town all around Guyana. In some instances, prices would have risen from 2021 to now by more than 100%. For example, a small sack of rice, and certainly if you go back and check the record, would be around $1,400, $1,500 in our time. And now in 2024, my wife said, she just said to me, she paid $3,100 for a sack of rice. I mean, I'm a member of parliament. I don't know how the ordinary people out there can survive those kind of hiking prices. So definitely more needs to be done. I agree with all the measures that Elsu would have highlighted. We have to be careful, even with these measures that we say we will put out. You have to improve the output of the country, especially in terms of agriculture. You have to do more there. The government is boasting a lot about they've invested 10 billion in let's look at one project, 8 million in the cage fish project. But how well is that going? How well is that even going for the indigenous community? I had the cause to ask the finance minister, the agri minister in a committee, the economic services committee, just a couple of weeks back. I'm the vice chair there. I said, please lay over to me the inputs there, in terms of the cage, how much you pay, in terms of the feed, in terms of how much fish you put in. I understand it's 6,000, the baby fish you put in there. And then the output, let's weigh it against the output. Are you really progressing? After one or two trials, can these people now take over, make enough money to take over the project, and it can really provide the kind of revenue and the kind of support in the community that they need? I think the answer is no, and that's why he would have actually refused to or ignore that request, rather, to provide that kind of information. We will have to do better. We will have to monitor these projects. We'll have to have more persons from GLDA and these agri, I forget what you call them, but we'll have to have a lot of them analyzing and assessing these projects as we go forward, to ensure that we're able to tackle that whole issue of inflation. and the rising cost of living.
Okay, let's
So,
go to the
Professor,
budget.
I just want
No,
to
no,
check.
time. We have to go to the budget now. Time, I'm sorry.
All
Time
right,
is
let's
running
go.
out on us here. Now, we are all rational individuals, rational and objective individuals. No budget passed by any government can be all that, everything in it can be bad. And no budget passed by government, everything in it can be good. So, Mr. Holder, you're in Parliament. Name me 3 to 5 things that were good with the budget. And then we can go to the bad stuff that you think is bad. Is there any good things in the budget?
Well, look, we struggle to find good projects. You see, if you analyze a project, you gotta analyze it holistically. For example, the cash grant. The cash grant might be a good thing in terms of providing some cash for people. But then on the other side, the same thing that we would have discussed, if we are not seeing the necessary improvements in agriculture, the kind of investments that we know will create that balance to ensure that there is no inflation, then I can't say that it is a good measure. I'm happy that people can receive money, but what I want to see is our measures that will allow us to move forward in terms of our economy and not create more inflation, because then you will be defeating the purpose of the cash grant. I would have analyzed the gold sector. A good thing is that they have a new company coming on stream, and you have that company is projecting to do about 350,000 more ounces. So that is a good thing. But guess what? Our production from 2019, for example, was 641,000 ounces. That would have dropped to 460 something thousand ounces, and therefore it means that 350,000 just gets you back to the 2019 level. And so it is in that context how we analyze the budget, and that is why we say that, you know, the budget really doesn't have anything. I asked the minister just on Friday, I said, why did your measures fail? You announced every year that your goal is going to be prosperous again, but yet you have failed in that regard. Now you come here to tell us that, oh, you're gonna increase it by so much percent. What new measures are you going to put in place to ensure that small and medium scale miners, the declaration coming from small and medium scale miners, go up again? They would have contracted by about roughly about, well, more than 50% over the course of 5 years. Last year alone, they contracted by over 33,000 ounces. Small and medium scale miners, those issues are not being addressed. And as long as those core issues for the ordinary people are not being addressed, we can't say anything good about the budget. Maybe the introduction of soy and corn might be a good thing, but we have to wait and see where that goes. That might be a good project, okay. And so we'll have to wait and see where that goes.
Mr. Lowe, the budget, there's education. Is there any good in education from the budget? Be specific, because time is of the essence now. Education.
Well, yeah, those who know me know education is something dear to my heart. I'm glad that we've seen a large allocation in the education budget. I think it's $170 billion, and that the University of Guyana has gotten more funding and it's now free. I'm of course a staunch advocate for the University of Guyana to be free. That, at least in terms of dollars, is good. The question, however, which is a serious question to be answered, is this government has spent more on education and had worse results in a wide variety of areas. In particular, the CSEC math pass rate has declined to 31%. I don't know how you can spend far more money, nearly twice as much as the AP and UAFC, and have a worse pass rate in some critical areas like that. The matriculation rate has fallen. So I'm glad, and of course this will cover a range of projects, I'm glad that money is being spent on education. I'm just concerned that I'm not sure the government has demonstrated the ability to use that money effectively. In fact, I mean, it seems to be that the more they spend, the worse it's getting. That is very concerning.
What about healthcare?
Yeah, it is. I think it is useful that we're seeing additional hospitals across Guyana. That's fine. But we want to see nurses paid so they can actually staff the hospitals. Now, what's happening is you're building out the infrastructure. That's good. I can say that that is useful. But if you don't have the staffing for the infrastructure, you've already got hundreds of nurses short at the Georgetown Public Hospital. And if you expand that to a range of additional hospitals, you're gonna have a massive chaos, and the hospitals will be empty. So on the one hand, it is good that we're spending on broadening our healthcare infrastructure, but on the other hand, that must be met with appropriate compensation for the healthcare workers who are intended to operate in these environments, in this environment. And of course, are we going to continue to lose our workers if we don't pay them well? This to me seems to be
But that's
a
something.
simple. Yeah.
Social
know,
services.
Oh, well,
Mr. Holder, you want to talk about social services?
Is it Elston or me?
Sherwin, you had a comment on healthcare. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yes. I was going to say it is also the way how they implement the programs within the health sector. For example, these persons that have to do the kidney restoring process, what do you call it, dialysis. Instead of you just making a lump sum available, which is grossly inadequate for a year's run in terms of dialysis, you're given that rather than equip these hospitals, the existing ones and the new ones with the necessary equipment to do that, to provide free service. That is a measure that we would like to see. And so health, as Elson said, we like the fact that they're building new hospitals. Again, the vouchers. I could touch on the vouchers as well. They're given a $10,000 voucher, clearly to carry the persons to the private health facilities. But again, I don't understand why. Because if you're rolling out these state-of-the-art hospitals, which is expected to take care of all the needs of the people, with state-of-the-art equipment, and you expect to have the staffing and so forth, then why are you trying to send people to the private, where obviously you do some tests, you find out that you have some ailment, you have to deal with it, you're obviously going to go back to that same doctor, and you have to find the money straight. So a lot of persons will fall into that trap.
What about the social services? You think what's good in the budget presented was good in it?
Social services, I don't know if Elson focused.
Yes, well, I think it is. Of course, it is useful that they provided more to those on public assistance, even though it is minimal, $3,000 a month. What we will say, though, is we really wanted to see the development of a proper social safety net to cover Guyanese. We talked about a job seekers benefit, which is kind of like unemployment insurance, and it's something that will bring a lot of people out of poverty and provide them a cushion while also allowing people to move from one job to the other, which makes your economy more efficient. So we want to see that, and it was extremely notable that you didn't hear the Minister for Finance mention poverty, I think, at all in his budget speech. You're living in a country with, estimates vary, but something along the lines of 40% poverty. And you don't talk about poverty? That was extremely damning. So that, I think, informs the government's approach when it comes to social services, when the government's approach when it comes to the question of a caring society. That is to say, they prefer not to talk about it at all. So the measures are minimal measures. We believe that, as an example, for people with disabilities, you have to assess each individual person's needs and provide for those needs, because there's so many different disabilities with so many different needs. That is a robust approach. That's
will an APDU government increase public assistance? And if so, to how much?
We're going to do a couple of things. One of the things that we want to do is we want to break down public assistance into those who are receiving, who have disabilities that are receiving, and who will need to receive varied amounts. So we're going to do a study of that and increase it based on those needs. So we can't give you an exact number. As an example, a paraplegic would need far more than somebody who maybe has a mental health issues and needs some assistance there. So that is one half of it. The other half is that there are some people who, whether through not being able to work and so on, will need assistance. We will look at the poverty line. And of course, you have to look at your poverty line relative to your income. No one in Guyana will be getting less than the poverty line in terms of their monthly income. So when it comes to those people who are on social assistance, they will be receiving above the poverty line. The last I saw was $35,000. That may change, but we will give them above the poverty line. So I would say the floor is.
What's the poverty line?
The poverty line, I think a couple of years ago, it was $35,000 a month was the poverty line in Guyana. And that's because
So public assistance receivers will get more than that.
they'll get more than that. No one will be below the poverty line
Okay.
in those types of programs. And then the last leg of it, of course, is the job seekers benefit, which we put at $40,000 a month. And that's for people who don't have a job, but who are trying to get employment. So that is at least a baseline, I would say.
Sports, youth and sports, quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. We lament the fact that the Linden Sports Complex, Linden Sports Ground, has not been completed. That must be completed. And we believe that we need to have a focus on supporting our athletes so that they can participate fully in a wide range of sports. We've heard complaints from athletes that they don't have adequate medical support, they don't have adequate funding, they don't have adequate facilities. That is something that we're gonna focus on. But we also believe that apart from athletics, there needs to be more focus on recreation spaces around the country. The PPP has a tendency of building a park. You put the benches and everything, but there's no shade. So nobody goes there. You have cats and dogs in the parks that they're building. We believe that we have to take a different approach to how we construct our recreational spaces. They need to be livable, usable spaces. So we're gonna have to evaluate the existing parks, upgrade them so that people actually use them, and build out in communities across the country those types of spaces. And that, of course, will generate a lot of jobs. And we've spoken about this. I think in the leader's last budget address, he spoke quite a bit around that. And the last thing I'd say is in terms of sports and arts, we've spoken about providing funding for artists who are looking to, whether it is write a book or go into music production and so on, some seed capital small business funding. So we would fold them into the small business programs and provide that kind of funding.
Okay, great. We've come to the end of the program. Mr. Holder, how would you rate the budget? 0 to 10. 0 mean the lowest, 10 mean the highest.
I would put the budget between 4 and 5. Maybe a 5. I'd give it a 5 because there are some measures there. For example, you're building schools, you're building hospitals, you're building police station. So I'll give you a thumbs up for that. But because there isn't real clarity or direction in terms of staffing, in terms of the services being provided, in terms of a guaranteed improvement in the lives of the people, I'll have to take the other 5 points for that. So I will put it at the level of 5.
Mr. Law, how would you rate the budget?
Because the government has not focused on improving its quality of governance, I may seem harsh, but I can't give this government a rating of better than 2 out of 10 for any budget they produce. Ultimately, we have seen a budget 4 times larger than only a few years ago, and it feels like it's the same budget from a couple of years ago. I don't know where all this money is going, and frankly, that's a tragedy.
Okay. How would you rate the government for the past 4 years, Mr. Holder? Same scale.
Scale 1 to that. Well, they will get their marks will go down. That I will give a 2. In terms of there is the corruption factor that is so prevalent. In terms of the whole issue of democracy in the country, they will lose some points there as well. And I think one of the most important thing is their collaboration with the opposition and other NGOs and the other organizations. I think they scored low marks for that as well. And so I can put them above somewhere around 2. I can't put them above that.
Mr. Law?
I would say I would give a similar mark, but maybe for slightly different reasons. I, of course, agree that governance has been terrible. They've not made efforts to reform. But I would also say that fundamentally what governments the world over have been asked to grapple with is a cost of living crisis. Now, this government has generally failed in that regard, but unlike many other governments, it has had more resources because of the high oil price than other governments to deal with it. So they're especially bad at dealing with the cost of living crisis. That's number one. And then number two is that I think ultimately for government in Guyana, and I had my criticisms of when we were in office, for a government in Guyana to do a good job, it must recognize that the country has moved from being the second poorest in the Western Hemisphere to having a per capita income this year, adjusting for prices, higher than the United Arab Emirates. Unless you absorb that and you adjust your quality of governance, you adjust your services to Guyanese accordingly, there will always be this kind of frustration amongst the Guyanese people because they're seeing money being spent. They're seeing oil production through the roof, and it feels like their lives aren't moving forward. So to me, any government that just doesn't absorb what's going on, and I had my criticisms of the Granger government, it's not gonna cut the mustard. So I can't get them any good rating.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having you. Mr. Holder, your closing remarks.
Well, all I would say is that we're at an important stage in our country. We're in an election year, and my hope is that the Guyanese people will focus on what the two sides are offering. Focus on our measures. Don't be carried away with the propaganda and all that follows it wrong. But just focus on the good programs that we have to offer. We're at a stage where we can either accelerate growth, eliminate poverty, bring genuine improvement in the lives of our people, all Guyanese, or we can spiral downwards. And that is what I believe we are doing currently under this PPP government. So my thing is that you must be focused and make the right decision as we move towards election.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lowe.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be on the program. And I would just leave with your viewers, this is the PPP's election year budget. And so in many cases, election year budgets is where you try to impress Guyanese, right? Your big promises and so on. If this is the best the PPP has to offer, then they don't have a whole lot to offer, because this was a very much underwhelming budget. And I think that's kind of the narrative a lot of people have been saying. If in this year, election year, the PPP still can't see it fit to give middle-class Guyanese a tax cut, and they claim to be, we're in favor of our businesses, we're in favor of the middle class and so on. They can't give you a meaningful tax cut when it costs them next to nothing to do it. Then they're never going to give you a tax cut. So it is time for Guyanese to sit down, internalize, and say, do you want this style of governance, or would you like a style of governance which focuses more on your benefits and making sure that you are directly improved, your life is directly being improved? You don't owe the PPP anything. They didn't do anything to persuade you through really targeted initiatives. Rather, you kind of have more of the same. And so I would say to Guyanese, now is a good time to just don't vote for the PPP, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, gentlemen, and don't go, stay. I'll talk to you off here. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our program, and I want to thank Mr. Noir Singh for making this program available, Mr. Devin Bissoon and Mr. Ryan Gobin for also our two technical directors. Without them, we will not be able to broadcast. And a special thanks to you, the listeners, and our sponsors for contributing to this program. Without you, we'll not be able to continue the program as well. And at the same time, we want to say that we are a fair and balanced network, and I would invite any two PEP members to come to our program next week, Monday, which I think is going to be the 10th, so that we can have a discussion on the same issues, similar issues, and make sure that we hear from both sides. Fair and balanced network. That's what we do here. So once again, thanks to all our listeners and to all our sponsors and to everyone. Stay well until next Monday at 8 o'clock Guyana's time. Thank you, gentlemen.